All right. Here with Edmundo Olivares.
Hi, Fletcher.
Thank you for being here, Edmundo. And we're going to jump into a question on seller financing. I'm going to read this directly from a client. This is the question about seller financing. We would be open to offering seller financing for 2 to 5 years to get more eyeballs on our property and possibly a higher price. But how are we protected against default? So essentially, if there's a lot of people here that will offer seller financing, right? But what happens if, let's say a lot of times it's 50% and then 50% is financed for, let's say, 5 years. How do they protect themselves against that second 50%?
Okay, perfect. Well, in Mexico, it's very usual to use traditional financing, no, bank and other financial institutions financing, and sellers financing is not very usual, to be honest, no. But in the last years, we have seen some of these transactions. It brings, of course, flexibility to sellers and buyers, because it represents a more marketability in the properties. The sellers receive a better income by way of interest, and in that regard, it's a figure that is coming in the last few years. How do you protect this? Well, you need to do two basic points. No, you need to do a very thorough due diligence from the buyer's standpoint, and from sellers, you need to be protected with a very strong document, legally binding document. And of course, the recommendation would be that this document be granted and be executed before a public notary, in order to bring more certainty to the transaction. And of course, I would also recommend that the seller receives highly legally advice in order to structure this transaction.
Okay, so let's just say it's 50% finance, right? So they do 50%, they take possession of the property, right? They own it, and it's like 50% financing. So let's just say second year, they've done all that. They have a document, they have all this, and all of a sudden the person who purchased the property is just like, hey, we're not paying anymore. What recourse do you have as the person who sold the property to either, I'm assuming, not get the property back at that point, but to get the 30% that is owed you? Is that going to be like a very difficult process?
Well, in those circumstances, there's a figure under Mexican law that it's a retention of property in a transaction, in a sale and purchase agreement. You can put that figure, and the meaning of that figure is that sellers retains property of the property until the buyer pays and all its payment obligations. So that would be a very important figure in order to insert in the document that the seller.
Okay, so it's essentially that, like almost like a soft closing, so to speak, or soft possession, right now, where you would have, if they take possession,
they can take possession, but the title of property it's the sellers until all payment obligations are comply.
Okay, so that would be the best way to protect yourself.
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
And of course, the structure of the document would be very, very strong in that sense. And as I told you, I would recommend to sign this before a public note.
Yeah, and because that'd be a very unfortunate situation, I think, in the United States. But I can already feel a migraine coming on from somebody defaulting and living in a residence that you still own, and then trying to get them out of that because they haven't paid you, and what a mess that would be.
Yeah.
So to me, it almost sounds like the seller financing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but would almost not be worth it unless you really have to do it to move the property.
Well, as I told you, in Mexico, it's not very common. It's not a very common figure, but I think it has a lot of advantage. And I think in the upcoming years, that would be a figure that will be used.
Okay. Yeah, because like most Americans here, you're starting to get more and more financing options, but it's still a very small I would say 6 times the people in the States are financing than they are here. So there's just a much smaller pool of people that are financing properties here, just because it's not like, my dad, or it's not like my client from Seattle is going to walk into Banorte, or, and all of a sudden get a loan from the Mexican bank. So having seller financing is like, it's definitely something that's appealing, but it's a question that I think at the end of the day, you really need to sit down, obviously all the time, but especially on a situation like this, with an actual attorney who's done this before and has that documentation.
Of course. Yeah. I think that would be the case. And also, I mean, if the transaction is done between U.S. citizens or foreigners, and they are used to do that figure, I think that the key point is just to build a very strong document in order to have that transaction done.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.